Hey everybody, welcome into this episode of Wiltfong Whiparound. I'm Grace Remington with Steve Wiltfong here, our director of recruiting. Hopefully everybody is recovered now from Super Bowl Sunday. A little piece of trivia for you before we begin. 19 starters on those Super Bowl rosters were former blue chip recruits. So you never know, the prospects we talk about this show could end up in that same spot someday. But let's get right into it, Steve. Let's start with one of the most sought after players in the country, and that is KJ Bolden. The five-star prospect is the top safety in the nation, tops in the state of Georgia, and second nationally. And he's just scheduled an official visit to Ohio State. So what can you tell us about him?
Yeah, Blair Angulo, our colleague, co-host of the 24/7 Sports Recruiting Show, was at the Battle Las Vegas 7-on-7 event over the weekend, where he spent some time with KJ Bolden and reported that KJ will take an official visit to Ohio State the weekend of June 16th. I'm also expecting him to take a visit sometime during spring practice here as well, and he's no stranger to Columbus in the past. And while we've talked about on this show how we really like Georgia's position for the #1 ranked player in the state, I know that behind the scenes, KJ Bolden and his family have been extremely positive with Ohio State about where their position is in this recruitment. And then I've had some conversations with KJ throughout his recruitment about how much he loves Ohio State and what the program can do for him. Now, Ohio State, they're recruiting him as a nickel, a guy that can bring versatility across the secondary, also a guy that can be a factor in the return game. And he's very dynamic with the ball in his hands. And I think that there's been some conversation around there about, you know, an impact that he could potentially make on that side of the ball on offense as well. So Ohio State, obviously well positioned in the recruitment for KJ Bolden. Official visit planned for June. Also expecting him back in the spring. You know, they're battling Georgia. Clemson had a great visit to Clemson there in January. Alabama, Florida State, Tennessee, some of the other schools that are a factor in this recruitment. But Ohio State near the top of the list for KJ Bolden.
All right, the top linebacker in the country and sixth best prospect nationally, Sammy Brown, is planning a trip to Oklahoma this spring. Now, the five-star has a long-standing relationship with Brent Venables dating back to his time in Clemson. So what's the latest with him?
Yeah, it would be a return trip to Oklahoma. They're definitely going to take it the first week of April. That's when Sammy's on spring break. They wanted to get out there during the fall, but wasn't able to make it happen. But Oklahoma, the relationship with Brent Venables, as you said, has them strongly in the mix here. Between his wrestling and track, it's hard for him to schedule visits right now. Wrestling for a state championship, he's the #1 ranked heavyweight in the state, and then he'll go right into track and field coming off wrestling season. But Oklahoma, they're guaranteed to get a visit over his spring break per the family. He was able to get back to Georgia and Clemson in January. In between wrestling matches of a tournament he was in January, he was able to sneak over and watch Georgia celebrate a second straight national championship. His relationship with Glenn Schumann is second to none in this process. Also has a really good rapport with Kirby Smart. And then he was at Clemson's Elite Junior Day the following weekend. He's really forged a nice relationship with Wes Goodwin and, of course, Dabo Swinney there. And we've talked about it numerous times. He was the very first prospect that Clemson's offered in the 2024 class. They're very familiar with him, which ties into his familiarity with Brent Venables, as he's been on the Clemson campus for years. And that relationship is carried over to Oklahoma, where Oklahoma will try and make a move on Georgia and Clemson. And then the fourth school that I think is prominent in this recruitment right now is Ohio State. He's loved his time up in Columbus. They really like Coach Jim Knowles. And then James Laurinaitis, who's come over from Notre Dame, the former All-American linebacker for the Buckeyes, is now back at his alma mater. And him and Sammy Brown have really they hit it off when he was at Notre Dame, and that's continued to blossom at Ohio State. So those are the four programs I'm looking at the closest. Georgia and Clemson, I like where they stand, but Oklahoma going to get a chance to make a move in the spring here. A decision expected by July. Grace, he wants to get this thing done and be able to focus on his senior year.
Another defensive player we want to get to is top 10 defensive lineman Justin Scott out of Chicago. He's just locked in a visit to the national champs. What's the latest on his recruitment?
Yeah, our colleague Alan True reporting that Justin Scott will take an official to Georgia the weekend of April 14th. And we've talked about him numerous times on this show and the move that Georgia's been making since January. Trey Scott went up there, watched Justin Scott play basketball. They extended a scholarship. Looked like at one point he was close to announcing a commitment. He had a commitment date. In fact, we liked where Notre Dame stood. The commitment date was on. The commitment date was off. It was on. It was off. One of the reasons why he didn't decide is because Georgia is a program that he certainly is excited about and wants to learn more about. Going to come down to Athens and check them out. I think USC and Ohio State are two other major contenders for Justin Scott alongside Notre Dame. But look, this is a Georgia team that's got a lot to sell at the point of attack with what they've been able to develop as of late, particularly for defensive linemen, and then as a team and program. And so, we'll see if Georgia can make a move on Notre Dame and some of these other programs. It's obvious that he's excited about them. Things are picking up fast between him and the Bulldogs, and he's going to get a chance to go down to Athens for an official visit. And we'll see where Georgia stands coming out of that.
All right, let's flip to some prospects on the other side of the ball, starting with four-star wide receiver Mylan Graham. He's the 7th receiver nationally, the 56th prospect overall, and holds over 20 offers. You recently talked to him about the school standing out to him at this point. So where do you think he might be leaning?
His recruitment is just so exciting and interesting to me because, Grace, when he camped at Ohio State last year, he had 0 offers and left Ohio State with his first offer, which is kind of hard to do, to go from 0 offers to getting noticed at a camp and then earning a scholarship. But he's obviously blown up since then. Brian Hartline and his staff certainly know what they're looking for, and a lot of schools have followed suit since then. I think Ohio State's in prime position for him. That's a program that got a head start on him, and they continue to build a good rapport with him, and certainly what they've been able to develop at the position, in addition to the relationships that they build with their top targets. Ohio State is in really good position, but so is Purdue. Purdue, the new coaching staff, led by Corey Patterson in this one, they've certainly made some strides in this recruitment since Coach Walters and company got to West Lafayette, and I think that Purdue is in an interesting position for Mylan Graham. Miami has really picked it up in this recruitment. Alabama's another place he camped and earned an offer that says it's pushing for him. Tennessee and their exciting offense. Georgia's recently offered Mylan Graham, and they could be a factor here. Michigan has him high on the board. Clemson's starting to pick it up here, but I still, my crystal ball is on Ohio State here for Mylan Graham. There are a lot of schools out there trying to change that as he starts to line up visits for the spring.
And 4-star running back James Peoples, he is the 6th running back in the country, right on the edge of the top 100, sitting at number 101 overall. He made trips to Texas and Oklahoma in January. He has another visit coming up this spring, and he also gave you his top 6 schools. So what have you heard from him?
Yeah, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Oregon, and TCU he rattled off when he gave us his top 6 schools. Rushed for nearly 2,000 yards and 28 touchdowns. We've had a lot of Ohio State talk on this show with Bolden and Sammy Brown and Mylan Graham, and now here with James Peoples. Ohio State's certainly in really strong position for him. He's going to visit in the spring at the end of March into April. And he's really hit it off with Tony Alford over there, Ohio State's running backs coach. Loves the offense. Brian Hartline and him are starting to really connect. Ohio State's offensive coordinator, and he really likes Coach Day. And so I think Ohio State's in an interesting position for him. He had some really good visits to Texas and Oklahoma in the month of January. Spoke highly about Coach Choice at Texas and Coach DeMarco Murray at Oklahoma. Those are programs that he thinks can really develop him. And he also really mentioned Oklahoma's soul mission and loves the way that Oklahoma pours into their athletes off the field. So that certainly caught his eye. He can't wait to get to Alabama at some point and learn more about them as their player development certainly speaks to him. They offered in December. Oregon offered in November. Same thing. He's starting to really get to know Coach Lachlan and those guys, but called Oregon special and looks forward to going up there and building on those connections. And TCU, they were one of the first programs to recognize people's talents. They had them in camp, offered him a scholarship back in the summer. He enjoyed watching them this season, really likes Coach Jones over there. and loves learning from him and the way he breaks it down and feels the family feel around the TCU program as well. But Ohio State certainly in good position for him going into his upcoming visit this spring.
All right, you're right. Ohio State kind of has been the theme of this show. So let's give some love to their rival and highlight some of the programs off to a fast start in this 2024 cycle. So let's talk about Michigan. The Wolverines rank 5th in 2024 with 7 commits. 5 of those are 4 stars and headlined by athlete Jacob Oden. So what do you like so far about this class?
Yeah, this is a class full of guys that kind of recognize their fit within the program early and jumped in the boat. And it's a lot of guys that come from terrific high school programs with a lot of leadership traits and qualities. So definitely like that as well. When I look at this class, the first thing that jumps out to me is Mason Curtis out of Nashville, Tennessee, Ensworth High, 6'4", 200 pounds. When you put on this film, there's not many linebackers that are as fluid, space eaters as him. I think he's just awesome out there on an island in space. He can cover, really good instincts, breaks on the football, great length, versatile, a guy that I think will ultimately be able to be a pass rusher on the next level as well. Jacob Oden's the jewel of the class from a ranking standpoint. His father's his high school coach there at Harper Woods. He's a two-way standout that can really catch the football and make plays on the offensive side of the ball, but going to play in the secondary on the next level, but has good size, obviously a high football IQ, understands techniques and coverages. He's going to bring a lot of versatility on the back end there. And when you talk about Michigan and the way they recruit, and this even applies in the 2023 class and before, they look for big bodies at the point of attack, particularly on the defensive line. And you got 2 more of those in this class, and Ted Hammond, who's 6'5", 260 pounds, and Manuel Beagle, who's 6'5", 280 pounds, who plays a lot of offensive line on the prep level, but going to play defensive line on the next level. Michigan had him out in camp, and he's certainly impressed with his size, his explosiveness, and speed to power and those traits. So a lot of developmental upside as usual for those Michigan defensive linemen. Luke Hamilton's already committed on the offensive line. Could be a very special offensive line class for Michigan, but Luke Hamilton, good junior tape, high-motored kid. He's a punishing blocker, loves to finish people off, has that mindset that Coach Harbaugh, Coach Sharon Moore, and company covet on the offensive line. And then Hogan Hansen, 6'6", 230-pound tight end that can play attached, play in the slot, play flexed out. You can bubble him, and he can make things happen after the catch. He makes things happen downfield, shows ball skills. And so this Michigan class is off to a really good start, Grace, and they have a chance to really hit big on some major targets moving forward. Certainly, you know about Jaden Davis, the 5-star quarterback from North Carolina. I think Michigan's in really good position for him. He's going to visit for spring ball. Running back Jordan Marshall out of the state of Ohio rushed for nearly 2,000 yards as a junior, 30 touchdowns, another 4 receiving touchdowns. He just put out his top 5 recently, but I think Michigan and Ohio State are best positioned. And talking to you right now, I think the Maize and Blue are the team to beat. He's been there several times, great relationship with Mike Hart and company. So I think Michigan has kind of set the tone for the Midwest top running back in Jordan Marshall. Receiver, Marion Stewart out of Bolingbrook is a guy that Michigan's certainly in prime position for. Channing Goodwin is another guy that I like the Wolverines spot at. Elijah Moore from Good Counsel is a guy that they're going to look to make a move with. Gatlin Bear out of Idaho, he's expected to visit this spring. Michigan's always going to be in good shape for tight ends. In-stater Brady Prescorn. I would think Michigan leads there, but not sure there's much urgency as far as him making a decision. Walter Matthews out of Georgia reported this week that he will be back at Michigan for a visit here this spring. But Demarion Witten, Jaden Riddell, Max LeBlanc, those are a couple other tight ends on the board. And to kind of circle back to what could be a special offensive line class, in addition to Luke Hamilton, like where Michigan stands for Ben Robruck, love where Michigan stands with Andrew Sprague, might love where they stand even more with Blake Frazier. Michael Uini visited this month, and they made an impression on him. They're battling Ohio State, among others, for Devontae and Deontay Armstrong, the twins from Lakewood, Ohio, St. Edward. Caleb Brewer from While Missing there in Ohio had a great visit in January. So did Wauclair Flynn. They're swinging at guys like Blake Baker, DeAndre Carter, and Jordan Seaton. So when you win 2 straight Joe Moore Awards, you're certainly in the mix for some big-time offensive linemen. Flipping gears to the defensive side of the ball here, on the defensive line, they're going to try and chip away at Dylan Stewart. I think George is in an interesting spot for him. But Darian Mayo out of good counsel, they'll get him to campus this spring. TJ Lindsey's a Michigan-type kid from Arkansas that they'll look to make a move with. D.D. Holmes from Washington, D.C. Gonzaga has Michigan high on his list. Marquise Lightfoot from Chicago, who Georgia just offered over the weekend. He's been to Michigan a couple times. They're in a good position for, but Brian Robinson from Ohio, top 247 player. Already have him crystal balled to Michigan. And as we kind of finish up this section on Michigan, linebacker, we already talked about Mason Curtis. If they can add Aaron Childs from good counsel to Mason Curtis, that would be a hell of a second-level haul for the Wolverines. Aaron Childs is one of the most coveted linebackers in the country. Visited Michigan in January. Sam Webb had a great interview with him from our Michigan site coming out of that trip. But it's obvious that he's super excited about the Wolverines, and he's a fit for the Maize and Blue on and off the field. But Caden Jones from Christ School in Carolina, I think they're going to get him up this spring. Christopher Jones is a 4-star from Virginia that has Michigan near the top of his list. Jeremiah Beasley is a major in-state target from Belleville. And they'd like to get Braden Platt in from Washington this spring. But Bryce West and Aaron Scott are a couple corners that Michigan's in really good position for. Bryce West visited in January. He's been several times. I probably like Aaron Scott to Ohio State right now, but no question he likes Michigan. And then some safeties, Grace. Zaquan Patterson is a guy that they covet. Ricardo Jones from the Peach State they're trying to get up to visit. Andres Farouk from St. Francis there, and then Jalen McClain from Jersey. So Michigan, there's a lot of momentum coming off 2 straight playoffs for them. And top 5 recruiting class right now, they look poised to be in the top 10 come the early signing period and beyond, especially if they can finish it out with Jaden Davis.
Yeah, that's coming off a number 18 recruiting class in 2023. So for all the worries about Jim Harbaugh talking to NFL teams, looks like they're doing pretty okay. All right, let's go to the ACC. Duke has a top 10 class in 2024, second in the ACC behind only FSU. 7 commits in this one, no blue chippers, but a good mix of prospects here. So, Steve, what can you say about the job Mike Elko is doing?
Well, I think it kind of starts with the quarterback that they have in the fold, and Hoss Hejny there from Aledo, Texas, their state champion quarterback and one of the most dynamic players at the position in the nation. Runs sub 11 in the 100-meter dash, but threw for over 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns as a junior. The district MVP used this 10.6 speed to rush for nearly 1,300 more yards and 15 scores. This is what some coaches view as not a deep year at quarterback in the 2024 class. Duke, Kevin Johns, Mike Elko to get out in front and land a state champion quarterback from the Lone Star State that is maybe as dynamic as anybody with the ball in his hands at the position. Really good get. And there were some programs that offered after he committed to Duke, but still hearing good things about him and his pledge to the Blue Devils. So Duke going out and landing a difference maker at quarterback for a program that's obviously on the rise under Mike Elko and company. They win 9 games in year 1, which nearly equals the 10 wins that they had the 3 years prior. That's big. And Northwestern and Stanford, kind of the programs that you stereotype as the ones that the high academic good football players look at. But Northwestern, they won just 1 game this past year. Stanford going through a coaching change. Maybe it's Duke that becomes kind of that destination U for those high academic guys that look at the Vanderbilts, the Stanfords and the Northwesterns. But the season Duke had certainly makes them an exciting option for guys like Landon Callahan, who they have committed, who's going to play corner for them that has good speed, or Ahmad Bro, who boasts a 4.4 GPA, who's got big hands and tremendous length, who could be a high upside pass rusher for them. They just beat out Wake Forest for Preston Watson, a defensive lineman who's super quick, can run, plays with good pad level and strong hands. So this Duke class ranked number 9th nationally, with a very exciting quarterback under center coming off 9 wins. How about the Blue Devils? Maybe we'll be talking more about Duke on Whip Around and in ACC shows moving forward.
All right. Good stuff. Well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Wiltfong Whip Around. Remember to send in your mailbag questions to us on Twitter at 247 Sports. And you don't have to wait for us to come back Monday. There's plenty of nuggets dropped throughout the week on our website. So be sure you are subscribed to 247sports.com. For Steve Wiltfong, I'm Grace Remington. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.